Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hey, welcome to Cannabis Common Sense. We have another exciting show for you tonight. Happy to welcome back John Cornett. Hey, John. I think we're going to have Clay Pearson here in just a couple moments. And we will have him on as a guest here. But in the interim, we have our Hemp News segment. We have a number of great flashback videos, and we'll be taking your phone calls in just a little bit. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous Dancing Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
First story tonight is from here in Oregon. The state of Oregon took several steps this week to reduce the size of Oregon's cannabis black market, including efforts to keep it away from kids. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission now requires cannabis growers provide advance notice of their harvest. The idea is to allow officials to turn up in the fields if they choose to and make sure plants aren't being siphoned off for the black market. The commission also passed a rule allowing it to revoke the marijuana worker permit of anyone selling to a minor. OLCC Commission Chair Paul Rosenbaum said, quote, "Today's action holds individuals with marijuana worker permits as responsible as our licensees because it puts in jeopardy their right to work in the legal cannabis industry. However, it's a privilege, not a right, to hold a license. We want to be in a position to take stronger action against those who don't take the privilege of their license seriously, and we'll be addressing strengthening our sanctions in the upcoming session," end quote. OLCC Executive Director Steve Marks says they've designed the rules to be seamless because they want producers to make them part of their normal business operations. Marks said, quote, "At the same time, it serves a very important function to preserve the integrity of our regulated market, to keep what's produced by the regulated market in the regulated market. That's exactly why we've worked so hard with the industry, law enforcement, and public officials to make this a rule that can bring a sense of transparent accountability to the harvest," end quote. In 2017, the OLCC started a sting operation designed to catch people selling to minors. Fines were increased and compliance improved, but the commission's having trouble with repeat violators. I've also am a medical grower and waiting on my OLCC license, and we went through our first Oregon Health Authority inspection, and so we've had our first inspection, and they told us they'd be back in 3 months to see the harvest. So after 19 years, we've had our first inspection. Our next story is from Aurora, Colorado. Heart attack patients with a history of marijuana use are less likely to die during hospitalization compared to those who test negative for the substance, according to data published in the journal PLOS-1, PLOS-1. Investigators with the University of Colorado compared the hospital records of over 3,800 heart attack patients who acknowledged having consumed cannabis or had tested positive for it to those of over 1.2 million similarly matched controls. They found that cannabis use was not associated with adverse short-term health outcomes after controlling for potential co-founders such as concomitant tobacco use. On average, patients with a history of cannabis use were younger than non-users. The authors reported, quote, "Marijuana-using patients were significantly less likely to die, based on 0.79, experience shock 0.74, or require intra-aortic balloon pump post-AMI or acute myocardial infarction than patients who reported no marijuana use. The results suggest that contrary to our hypothesis, marijuana use was not associated with increased risk of adverse short-term outcomes following AMI. The findings suggest that additional studies warranted to further investigate these discoveries and to identify potential mechanisms by which marijuana is associated with improved short-term outcomes following heart attacks, end quote. Separate studies have similarly identified an association between marijuana use and decreased in-hospital mortality in trauma patients, those undergoing orthopedic surgeries, patients with traumatic brain injuries, and heart failure patients. This study, Marijuana Use and Short-Term Outcomes in Patients Hospitalized for Acute Myocardial Infarction, appears in PLOS One. A poll of voters in 60 battleground congressional districts found that candidates who favor marijuana legalization are more likely to get elected than those who don't. These are races that will probably decide which party controls the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. in the next Congress. The poll of 800 likely voters found that 60% favored ending marijuana prohibition and that 79% favored legalizing medical marijuana. Those numbers are consistent with a number of national polls taken in the past year. The more interesting finding in the survey is that 44% of voters in the battleground districts said they were more likely to vote for a candidate who supports legalization versus 33% who said they would be less likely. Moreover, 26% of those polled said they would be much more likely to vote for a pro-pot candidate. 55% of voters would be more likely to vote in November if a marijuana initiative was on the ballot in their state. And in at least 4 states, they will likely have marijuana legalization questions on their ballots this fall: Michigan, North Dakota, Missouri, and Utah, and potentially Oklahoma again, even though Oklahoma just voted on it back on June 26, where it passed for medical. The Michigan and North Dakota initiatives call for full legalization. Utah will vote on legalization of medical marijuana. Missouri voters may vote on as many as 3 separate medical marijuana questions. It's complicated. Also in Oklahoma, 2 initiative petitions for constitutional amendments are being circulated, one to legalize medical marijuana and one for full legalization. Last month, Oklahoma voters passed a medical marijuana initiative as an initiated law instead of a constitutional amendment, which meant the state's socially conservative state legislature could mess with it, which it immediately started to do. Supporters of the initiative charged the legislature was attempting to thwart the will of the voters and immediately started circulating separate petitions for medical and recreational legalization in Oklahoma as state constitutional amendments, which the legislature can't change. As of last Sunday, the Oklahoma group had more than 118,000 signatures on the recreational marijuana petition. They need 123,725 valid signatures to get on the ballot and would like to get 150,000 to survive signature disqualifications. By law, the petitions have to be submitted by August 8. Oklahoma and the other 4 states that will vote on marijuana this November voted for Trump in 2016. However, the poll sample size of 800 likely voters is too small to draw any conclusions about any of the 60 individual congressional districts. Our next story tonight is from Trenton, New Jersey. The New Jersey State Attorney General has called on the county and municipal prosecutors to suspend marijuana-related prosecutions until early September. In a letter this Wednesday, New Jersey's Attorney General Guber Grewal wrote that all municipal prosecutors in New Jersey will seek an adjournment until September 4, 2018 or later on any matter involving a marijuana-related offense pending in municipal court, so that his office could develop appropriate guidance for prosecutors. A working group is expected to take up the issue this summer. New Jersey has one of the highest annual marijuana arrest totals in the nation. Under New Jersey state law, possessing cannabis is punishable by up to 6 months incarceration and a $1,000 fine. New Jersey's Governor Phil Murphy campaigned on a promise to legalize and regulate adult marijuana possession and sales. To date, several bills are pending in the New Jersey legislature to legalize the plant. Lawmakers are anticipated to begin debating this legislation in September. Out of Denver, Colorado, marijuana use by young people remains largely unchanged since the enactment of voter-initiated laws legalizing the plant's possession and retail sale to adults. According to data released by the Department of Public Health and Environment, state survey data finds that a percentage of teens acknowledging using cannabis in 2017 was down 19%, or it's down to 19%, down 1% from 2013. Colorado voters passed legalization in November 2012. Retail cannabis sales began on January 1st, 2014 in Colorado. The percentage of Colorado youth using cannabis is consistent with the national average. By contrast, self-reported marijuana use by adults has increased slightly, driven largely by increased consumption by younger adults. This data is consistent with prior studies finding that neither the enactment of medical cannabis legalization nor the enactment of adult use regulation is independently associated with increased marijuana use by young people. Next story is from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, state capital. A fiscal report issued by Pennsylvania State's Auditor General estimates that taxing Pennsylvania's existing retail cannabis market would yield $581 million in new annual revenue into the coffers for the state of Pennsylvania. The report estimates that just under 800,000 Pennsylvanians are currently using cannabis. Statewide polling finds that a majority of voters endorse legalizing and regulating its use by adults. The report concludes, quote, "The benefits of regulating and taxing marijuana are undeniable. As its neighbors weigh the issue, Pennsylvania must act to create its own marijuana market. Otherwise, it runs the risk of losing the revenue from potential customers to other states. It's time for Pennsylvania to stop imagining the benefits of marijuana and realize them," end quote. Pennsylvania's Auditor General Eugene DePasquale has support of statewide legalization. Governor Tom Wolf has expressed support for decriminalizing marijuana possession offenses, but has been reluctant to endorse legalizing the marijuana market. Our last story tonight is from Italy. The long-term use of cannabis-infused concoctions is effective at reducing pain intensity and mitigating anxiety and depression in patients with chronic pain, according to clinical data published in the journal La Clinica Therapeutica. Italian researchers assessed the long-term use of cannabis in a cohort of 338 patients with chronic pain. The subjects consumed between 5 milligrams and 10 milligrams of THC-infused tea daily. 214 subjects completed the one-year trial without interruption. The authors reported, quote, "After 12 months of therapy, pain, disability, anxiety, and depression show substantial improvement. Our research demonstrates that cannabis therapy as an adjunct to traditional analgesic treatment reduces pain intensity, improves daily functionality, and allows a reduction in anxiety and depression symptoms. Cannabis should be prescribed responsibly by taking into account the comprehensive pain history of the patients, obtaining informed consent after discussing the risks and benefits of treatment, and administering periodic follow-up of treatment efficacy," end quote. This study, Medical Cannabis in Patients with Chronic Pain, Effect on Pain Relief, Pain Disability, and Psychological Aspects, a prospective, non-randomized, single-arm clinical trial, appears in La Clinica Therapeutica, an Italian publication. Okay, well, I'm happy to say we've got John Cornett back here, and Clay Pierce has made it into the studio, and stay tuned. Here's John. Welcome back, John. You've got a
really
friend
good.
with you,
Good
Toby.
Good to be
Thanks
back,
for being
Paul.
on, Toby.
Hey, Clay, welcome, brother. Yeah. I got Toby here. My brother introduced me to him a few days ago, and looks like we can work together here. He's going to help me out with this song here that
Yeah, just clip it there.
I'm sure you guys have heard here and there. But anyway, it goes like this. What if God smoked cannabis? Woo! Hey. If God had long hair and a goatee, and if his eyes look pretty glazed, if he looks spaced out, would you buy his story? Yeah, would you believe he had an eye infection? Yeah, God looks baked, and yeah, God smells good, and yeah. What if God smoked cannabis? Hit the bong like some of us. Drove a tie-dyed microbus, and he subscribed to Rolling Stone. When God made this place, in the beginning, did he plant any seeds or did he put them there? For Adam and Eve, so they be hungry for the apple that the snake was always offering. And yeah, God smells good. And yeah, God smells good. That's right. Yeah, he rose great too. Yeah, what if God smoked cannabis? That's right. When he made the platypus, when he created Earth, our home, does he like Pearl Jam or the Stones? And do you think he rose his own up there in heaven on his throne? And when the saints go marching home, does he just sit and smoke a bone?
Thank you, John. John Cornett and Toby. What if God smoked cannabis? Hey, welcome back. So you just got back from Colombia, South America today, or yesterday?
Yesterday afternoon.
Okay, all right. And so, as some of our long-term viewers might remember, you went through quite an ordeal on your way to Colombia back in November 1st of last year.
Actually, it was Halloween. That was the problem right there.
Yeah.
It
So
ended up November 1st. I got arrested. Yeah.
yeah. So you were at the. Tell our audience what happened when you were at the El Salvador airport. So you were just flying through El Salvador. You weren't visiting El Salvador.
No.
You didn't leave the security to go through customs at all.
No.
You just were sitting in the airport waiting for your connecting flight.
Well, actually, I was in the international part of the airport. I went to the Avianca desk to reserve because my phone wasn't working.
And Avianca was the airline,
No, it's
a
fine.
Colombian-based airline.
Right, and it was actually I was on TACA, but it was through Avianca. So I went
Okay.
to Avianca and used their phone because mine wasn't working to try to get a taxi here when I got here. And because I wasn't getting here till like 3, 4 in the morning. And just as I hung up the phone, somebody tapped me on the shoulder, El Gringo or something. The guy says, "Hey, Gringo," and I turned around and it was just a guy in a suit, kind of a plain suit, not really an official suit. He proceeded to say that we think you have cannabis. You're right away, excuse me. He said, "I'd like to talk to you if you had a moment." Okay, I had no idea.
Right.
And so they took me over to the side, and by this time 3 other people converged, and I knew by then that it had to be some sort of
Cannabis event.
police official type thing, and possibly
Right.
question me about cannabis. And the next thing he said was, "Yeah, we understand you have cannabis with you." And I said, "Yeah, sure, I've got a license for it." And I had only thought I had maybe 2 grams of oil, if that. I had mistakenly thrown away some socks thinking it was a complete brain thing.
So you had a little bit more than you thought you
Yeah,
had,
I
but
had
still
an
not a
ounce.
great amount.
No,
I
I
mean,
had an ounce.
altogether, what was it? About a little bit more than an ounce of
34 grams total, 32 grams of weed, and including the bag, and 2 grams of oil. But they considered that to be another 40 grams because they weighed the plastic container it was in.
That
But it
doesn't
was
seem right.
$13 worth of marijuana total. And,
Yeah.
I'm shaking.
Bad memory. So you were at the airport, they pull you aside, and then they take you back behind the counter.
Yeah, because they want to see what I have.
And you went through a lengthy interrogation at the airport.
12
How
to
long?
11, 12 hours at least, maybe a little longer. And, all the time I was reassuring that, this is just a process.
Right.
I was thinking of another word, but...
And you didn't have any idea what the now you were a legal medical marijuana patient here in Oregon.
I had like 5 cards.
And
in
you
my
were a
pocket.
legal medical marijuana patient in Colombia, where
Yes,
you were going.
Yes.
But you weren't in Colombia, in El Salvador, and the laws
Still
were
in
much
America,
worse
though.
in El
I was
Salvador.
still in America, I thought.
Yeah.
And I was still, even where they took me, I was still in the international part of the airport. And so they're saying it's just like a precaution thing, It's just I can't think of it, but process. And they said, "You'll be on your way soon." All the time reassuring me, but I already knew I missed my flight because the flight was an hour later, and we had already gone by 9, 12 hours. And so I knew something was not right. And they had this big stack of papers. They went, they had the marijuana all spread out and taking photos of it. And then they searched me and they found $9,000 approximately in an envelope, and
You had just sold
my trailer that I lived in.
trailer and some belongings, a lot of different belongings.
Right,
I
yeah,
remember you were
everything.
trying to sell records and everything,
Yeah, sold everything.
coins and
Yeah.
stuff.
and their eyes got as big as golf balls, and started laying the money out and taking pictures of it left, right, and sideways, and high-fiving each other. They weren't actually high-fiving, but it was like that. There was the emotion in the air. It was like they had hit the jackpot. And I'm like, this is, I know it's only peanuts, really, because I'm not really that wealthy or anything. It's all the money in the world I had. And they had filled out maybe a stack of about 100 pages, handwritten, and then they wanted me to sign them. And it's all in Spanish. I'm like, I can't sign this. I have no idea what it was. And I knew I couldn't really sign it the way I normally sign my handwriting, because I wanted to be like under duress. I should have just signed under duress. And you should do that if anything ever happens to you. Sign under duress. So I signed my name with full name with Andrew and everything, so that, because I don't sign my name that way, so it would be construed as different.
That was your hope.
I hope.
Never came to that point.
It has never gotten that way. It was, as soon as I signed the final letter, they put handcuffs on me and took me away, and took me to the anti-drug unit, which is a big outdoor type of, like a campground.
And in
almost.
El Salvador, they're really famous for killing a lot of people, that
Yeah.
anti-drug unit, isn't
Right.
it? Now you know now. You didn't realize that then, though.
The feeling was in the air. I mean, I kind of knew my life was in danger, because the money was cash, and they could just deny anything that I ever existed. I could be put in a ditch and shot in the
You
head
didn't
or
have
whatever.
any way to call people either.
No, and that was the big deal.
So
Right.
after you'd been held for 3 days,
Right, they were
I
transferring
was
me.
at my office, and my cell phone said I was in the bathroom, actually.
Sorry.
And it said, I'm getting a call from El Salvador.
Right.
And I thought, well, I don't know anybody in El Salvador. And so I let it go to voicemail. And fortunately, you were able to leave a voicemail message.
Right,
So as soon as I got out of the bathroom, a couple minutes later,
right.
you didn't know that part, I called you back, and I was able to reach you on this police officer's cell phone.
I begged, borrowed, and stealed, kind of browbeat this.
After 3
guard
days.
into
And
letting
my
me
number
use the
was the
phone.
only one you had. How
I
was
just knew
that?
the prefix, and I knew the last was THCF, which is
Yeah.
covered up.
Yeah.
And I used that to get a hold of somebody, because my brain was going nuts. I mean, I knew I was in big trouble, and got a hold of you, luckily, and you got a hold of Don, and Don got a
Don's
hold of...
an Ohio attorney
Yeah.
with that has a cannabis museum in Ohio and now in Columbia. So you're actually working with him in Columbia
Well,
too, right?
I'm assisting him any way I can. He saved my life, along with you and
Yeah.
Ricardo. And
So I flew there after. So you were held on November 1st, and I think it was December 21st. I flew to El Salvador
Right.
and met you
Right.
there. And I got permission through the U.S. Embassy. The U.S. Embassy there arranged meetings with you, fortunately, or I wouldn't have been able to see you since I'm not a family member.
Right, yeah,
but
they
the
told me
U.S.
that.
Embassy got permission
I had to sign
before I
papers.
got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to sign that it was okay for me to talk to them about
That
you.
was so weird. That country
And,
was so freaking backwards.
And so I went there to this prison that is very, very famous for being incredibly dangerous. In fact, the Guardian, a British newspaper, had an article I looked up right away that said it was the most dangerous prison in the world.
Right, I can believe that.
Yeah.
Having never been in prison, though, I had nothing to reference by. Yeah,
Right.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah. So you don't really speak Spanish.
No, I had maybe 100 words, and they were just, they didn't really.
And the
make
people
sense.
there didn't speak English.
Not at all. There was maybe 3 people there, and they were inmates too. So
And they weren't in your cell or anywhere near
Not
you,
my
right?
cell. Well, actually, one person in my cell did speak English, and he helped a lot. He was a
I
big
see.
assistance. His name was Angel, of all things.
Uh-huh,
And yeah, he was.
So right after I met you, the next day I had a press conference there that was covered by the local television and newspaper. El Salvador is not a very big country. It's probably like a quarter the size of Oregon.
Right.
But it's very volcanic, very tropical.
Yeah, we had several earthquakes when I was there, 5 point or something.
Yeah.
5.4.
Yeah, the main capital of San Salvador sits in a caldera along with a crater lake, just like Crater Lake National Park in Oregon. There's a little, just like Wizard Island in Crater Lake, there's a little volcanic island that sticks up above the lake under the caldera with a much taller volcano next to it than we have here in Oregon.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that. You did. I didn't get to see that yet.
Well, you didn't get to look. Well, you were.
I left in a
I saw
hurry.
it from a distance when
Yeah.
we went to dinner up on a mountaintop, but the
I got out of
lawyers
there.
took me.
Yeah,
Your
I
lawyers.
was advised to leave as soon as possible,
Yeah.
so I did.
So
left
tell
it-
us how you got out of prison. What happened?
Well, I was getting really
You were in
sick.
there
10
for
days.
more than 3 months.
Yeah, a little over, just a couple days over 3 months. And I started getting, last 10 days I was there, I was really, really sick. I was laid in bed, and this is like, they don't let people lay in their beds. I laid in bed for 10 days.
Did you have a fever?
Yeah, I had fever. I had edema. I would look like an elephant. I was like a Hillsborough Doughboy.
You're swelling up in many
my
different.
whole body. My legs start out with my legs, my feet.
Found out you had a deadly infection.
Right, yeah. I had,
Kind of like MRSA.
I'm going to even tell you.
Well, that's good enough. You had a deadly
It was
infection, and
bad,
you
yeah.
had to have. So they let you out, and you immediately went to the hospital.
Yeah, they said they were going to take me to a clinic, and by the time I got to the clinic, I was so bad that I guess I was somewhat incoherent, and they decided they couldn't handle me anymore. You know,
You were
they
on
have to pay
death's
for
door.
it. I guess the doctor said if I'd been 8 hours later, there's nothing to do to save me, because I did die on the operating table during the first surgery.
You had to have a lot of dead necrosis
a lot
or
of
dead flesh
not-
removed.
Yeah, a pound or two. They got their pound of flesh, put it that way.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Then you had to
45
stay in the
days.
country. You were in the hospital for how long?
45 days in the hospital.
45 days in the hospital until you could finally get up and get around.
Just over 4 months total, and I stayed with my lawyer's family and my lawyer, and that was really nice of
Ricardo
them.
Langlois. He's a good young
Yeah.
man. He his mother and father took you in.
Yeah, it was great. It was really awesome. And great hospitality, great food in El Salvador. Mom was a great cook.
But then you came back to the United States. You were here on our show, and you've been able to go back to Colombia for a few months since then.
Yeah, I've been there just under 3 months.
Under 3
And
months.
just came back yesterday. I'm trying to go back again and go through Bogota and try to file some papers to be a resident if I can.
Get your so you first went to Colombia with me 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago for
2016.
Expo MediWeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was November of 2016, and we did like a 3-week trip around, first in Medellin for the Expo MediWeed, then we toured the cannabis growing region around Cali
Right. where I
and
live now.
Toribio, and that's where you live now.
Yeah.
You really like that area,
It's
and it was an
awesome.
incredible tour, I got to say that. And then we went to Bogota and went to the, what is it, Copa del Rey?
Copa del Rey.
Yeah, the Cup of Gold.
Right.
And I got to be a judge. You were a judge. We got to
Great.
judge some
Really fine. weed.
really fine sativa cannabis, and it reminded
Very.
me of the old days because I had used a lot of Colombian back in the 70s.
Yeah, I'm still in search of that multicolored Colombian and the Colombian Gold officially. I have seen a lot of different marijuana, and some very good marijuana, but want to find that. It still exists down there somewhere.
So tell us about cannabis in Toribio, where you're staying, which is about an hour and a half outside of Cali.
It's about 3 hours, an hour and a half if you got a private drive. If
Yeah,
you're riding the
that's-
bus or whatever, it's
That's
about
what
3
I did.
hours,
We
yeah.
rented
Oh, yeah,
vehicles when
drove
we were
stuff.
there,
I've
so
been
I
riding the
remember
bus
it
a
being
lot.
an hour and a half.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
And if there's no traffic stops or anything like that, 'cause sometimes they close the roads down. You got to wait for an hour to get through.
But cannabis just grows all over that area, all through the
It's
mountainsides, and
insane.
people are harvesting it everywhere.
I've got a video of the 6 o'clock in the morning. It's dark at night, and it's just all these lights through the mountain. I'm on the bus going down, so it's all moving. It obscured a lot, but the entire mountainside for 45 kilometers on both sides of the mountain, up and down the hillsides, is all these lit up grids
So,
of lights, and so it's all
In
marijuana.
Colombia, it's right on the equator, and so it always has 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. So that means our cannabis plants immediately start flowering. So what they do is they put out cannabis plants, and then they put fluorescent compact lights above them so they will not flower. So these lights come on in little rectangles on the sides of mountains, kind of like that. So you see all these lit up rectangles and squares all over the mountainside, really. And so it's amazing the way it's lit up like that.
It looks like a nightscape of a city.
A vertical though, because it's all on the mountainside.
Right. Well, no, it looks just like a city because of the way they're lit up. And yeah, there's some at an angle, but your brain.
But it's that white fluorescent light.
Right.
You know. It's,
and they're not trying to grow the plants at night. They're just trying to disrupt that enzyme.
Stop them so they don't flower.
Right.
And they're still using normal daylight for the.
They get 12 hours of really intense light.
Yeah, yeah, because your Toribio is what, at about 4,000 feet elevation?
Sure feet. It's 7,000.
Is it 7,000?
7,000 meters.
Ah, no, it can't be 7,000 meters.
No,
That's
7,
taller than the
feet,
tallest
7,
mountain.
Feet,
7,000 feet.
Yeah, I don't know.
And the
meters.
tops of the ridges,
yeah,
probably.
Salvador still has my phone, which has an altimeter in it, and I don't know what it is.
I see. Okay.
They still have all my things, as a matter of fact. Don't go to El Salvador.
So you
ever.
and I went to the very first Expo MediWeed in 2016. That was your first trip there.
Right.
And then when I went back for Expo MediWeed last year, you weren't there. I had just come from visiting, you know, you were in jail, and I had yet to go visit you in jail there, as I recall. But, you know, a lot of people were worried about you at Expo MediWeed.
And I had no idea.
But now you're going to be there for this next year. You know what? I just found out tonight that a fellow from Expo MediWeed, David Ponce, he has put out a video promoting Expo MediWeed for this November, for 2018, and he put it up on Facebook, and I think we have that video ready to run. Let's see if we can run this, I think it's about a 1:40 video from Expo MediWeed in Colombia. We'll be right back after this video. I'm motivated because cannabis motivates me. It's actually the oldest crop. It's been cultivated by humans for over 30,000 years. All archaeologists agree it's the first crop. And it started, its indigenous area is the Himalayas around Tibet, Nepal, and India, and Afghanistan. And by 12,000 years ago, its cultivation had spread to the Mediterranean. And it's the basis of agriculture. The chickens, the cows, the horses, they were domesticated by people who grew hemp. And so hemp started agriculture, and it's the most productive crop. It makes more fiber from its stems, could more than replace all the trees that are cut down on Earth. It makes more fuel and oil from its seeds. And its biomass. You can completely replace petroleum by just growing 10% of the world's crops with hemp. And it makes more protein once you press those seeds and take out the oil. It's the best protein for people. It matches humans' needs perfectly. So it's the most productive crop on each of those. And so it's the oldest and most productive crop. So you can't do anything better than for the future of life on this planet and our necessity to bequeath all the biodiversity that we can, what's left, and hemp will help in that battle. That's it. All right, so they just put that video out there tonight, and I knew you were going to be here. I figured, well, there's a little promo for Expo MediWeed. In fact, I found out that just last week they have secured Vicente Fox, the former president of Mexico, as their keynote speaker at Expo MediWeed. So I'm happy to know that Vicente Fox will be there. Maybe we'll get a chance to visit with him.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to meet him.
So you're going to be there this year?
I'm planning on it. If nothing happens, I only have 3 months left in the country.
On your tourist visa?
Right, and if I get papers this next month, I'll be fine. But if I don't, I'll have to come back and stay here for a couple months and then go back.
So you've gone back to Colombia. Tell us about the Cannabis Museum Hotel and about Toribio and what you're doing now in Colombia.
Well, I'm doing whatever I can to help Don. I'm not actually working because I
don't have your work permit yet.
Yeah, yeah, I can't work down there. But he's got a little hotel with about 7 or 8 rooms, and it's pretty unique. It's got a nice mural on the front showing what's happening in the mountains. All you have to do is look at the mountains and see the same thing.
Does he have some of his antique medical marijuana things there?
He's got some antique glass there. He's got a mural of a bookcase of glass bottles, which kind of is really highly detailed and high quality, so you can read the labels on the books and the bottles. And it covers, and you can tell it's real. So I mean, it's really photorealistic, or it is a photograph.
Yeah.
And
he's been making some very high quality photographs on metal and glass and
yeah, from a distance it looks just like you can't tell it from the real thing.
Right.
And he's got some other artwork that hasn't been unveiled yet. He's just got the cases built. It's a really nice place. It's in a unique spot. There's a lot of things to see that are cannabis related.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of history in the neighborhood.
I know I went on the tour we went to the Cauca, which is the state that Toribio's in, the Cauca Cannabis Association, and they gave a presentation to us about some of their things. You remember that presentation?
I remember that.
It's been a while now.
Yeah. There's not a lot going on. They've got a new president.
Yeah, and he's much more conservative than the last president.
Right, and we're still waiting to see what's happening.
Kind of Trumpian guy.
A little bit. I don't know a lot about him. I should know more. I didn't know there was an election coming up. I should have even researched more of that, too. I think things will go right. Once the genie's out of the bottle with cannabis, you can't stuff them back in.
So this Cannabis Museum Hotel, how much is it a night?
It's $70.
$70
I'm not
US?
positive. I think it's $70 US.
And what kind of amenities are there?
As much cannabis as you can possibly smoke. We're working on getting some cannabis cuisine. Things seasoned with cannabis. Food's taken care of. It's all pretty much all inclusive.
So it includes meals and everything.
As far as I understand, I don't work there, and I since I've been out, they've had guests, but I haven't been there when the guests have been there.
Our friend Mike Bifari, who you met here in Oregon and who's helped us here several times, I know is he there now?
I believe he's there now. We passed each other kind of in the night. I was on my way out and he's on the way in, but I think he was going to Bogota at the time. We didn't actually talk. I mean,
I know he got a longer term visa to stay.
Yeah, he's there for at least a year, if not 2 years. I met with immigration in Cali, and they said there would be no problem. I could get a 1 to 5 year visa.
So this is recently?
Yeah, just went there 2 weeks ago. But I don't know. I got to make sure everything's cool. I am a felon here, but everyone I've talked to said it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
So
you can have that felony probably expunged now.
You should be able to, sure.
Yeah.
Especially
you
since it's such a silly one.
Pay money to a lawyer and wait for them to jump through the process. But marijuana crimes are now expungible. In fact, even non-marijuana crimes, if they're non-violent, can be expunged going through a court process. But marijuana crimes are definitely addressed in state law as being expungible by a judicial action.
If it's an issue, I will do that. If it's not,
I wouldn't think it is. It's probably pretty expensive there to do that. To make it happen here.
Right.
So I have another video here we're going to run. Is there anything else you want to say before we jump into this video?
No, that's cool.
This is a video from 1995. This fellow came through. I was selling hemp paper with my company Tree Free Eco Paper from 1989 through 1997. So this video, I think it was shot in 1994, came out in 1995. This is a little excerpt from Planet Hemp. We'll be right back.
Besides growing only male plants, science has created a genetic hybrid that produces no marijuana whatsoever.
Well, non-industrial hemp would be illegal marijuana. The things that's being grown in people's basements are imported from Thailand. Industrial hemp is a different hybrid. It's grown differently. It's grown for the stalk. All the fibers come from the stalk, so they grow it close together. They don't grow it for the leaves or the buds.
It's the same plant, but the plant that produces the best and most fiber doesn't produce the psychoactive substance in any quantities that are useful for drug production.
They've been doing it for generations in Western Europe and for centuries in Eastern Europe. In fact, in the United States, we had industrial hemp until 1937.
Scientists have dated hemp use back 12,000 years. It is known to be one of the first 4 cultivated crops.
12,000 years ago, hemp was one of the first crops that was purposely cultivated by human beings in the first agricultural settlements that sprung up in the Tigris-Euphrates valleys and in the Yellow River Valley.
Sailing ships used hemp to make the sailcloth, and hemp's been used in making paper for centuries and centuries.
This one plant was used to make the paper that Bibles and even the Declaration of Independence were printed on. hemp has been woven into garments throughout history and across the world. Not only was the very first American flag sewn by Betsy Ross made from hemp, but so were the clothes and supplies of the many soldiers that fought to keep her waving.
It was illegal not to grow hemp in some of the British colonies because they needed it for their sails and their ropes, and they needed enough of a production to satisfy the Navy.
But more recently, in the 1940s, when the United States was at war in the Pacific and many of our supplies were cut off, the United States government produced a video called Hemp for Victory. This video was to encourage farmers to grow hemp for the war effort.
American hemp must meet the needs of our Army and Navy as well as of our industries. In 1942, patriotic farmers, at the government's request, planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand %. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp.
Today, when grown for paper production, it would take 4 acres of trees to make the same amount of usable pulp material as 1 acre of hemp.
Well, hemp is the longest and strongest plant fiber, so it can make a stronger paper than wood fiber. Wood fiber's maximum length is about 7 to 8 millimeters, where hemp fiber can be up to 3 meters long, or hundreds of times longer.
That same 1 acre of hemp can be harvested 3 times a year, for hemp only has a 120-day growing season.
Tree-free paper can be made with any combination of hemp pulp from 10% to 90% to 100%. The paper we're currently producing is 90% hemp, 10% cotton. And it's got the obvious advantages over wood pulp because you don't need to cut trees to make nice paper. It's also stronger than wood pulp. It can be recycled more times.
According to USDA Bulletin 404, a waste product from making canvas, rope, lace, and linen.
Yeah, that guy talks too much anyway. Here's our hemp thing. This is hempcrete. It's concrete made with hemp fiber and quicklime, which is the ingredient in regular concrete as well. Here's our hemp twine, hemp seed oil, and our hemp flame for freedom. This is hemp oil burning a hemp wick, and this is why marijuana was made illegal, because the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate elite, fascist sons of a bitches do not want us to drive our cars on hemp seed oil. And so they made up the whole video, or the whole reefer madness myth.
Right.
So we like to talk about that. In fact, Israeli Canadian petrochemical companies come in and attacked me for speaking about hemp and how it can replace petroleum, and they have had a hostile corporate takeover, which is why we have this banner turned around. If you'd like more information about that, I have a clinic business that they are currently taking over. It hasn't come to trial yet, though it should sometime in the next few months. So I'm hoping we'll win at trial, and they'll have to pay tens of millions of dollars, and I'll get control of my company back. Of course, they're hoping just the opposite. But they got a court order saying I could not use my banner for the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, even though I'm the president of the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation and THCF. I cannot use that name, they say, because these people claim they own it, but they never paid me anything, and they fraudulently induced us to agree to work with them based on this corporate takeover without paying anything. It's really an unbelievable story. To get more information, or I urge you, do not go to my old clinic right now. If you need to find a doctor to help you get a medical marijuana permit, we have doctors all over America who can help you. We have a medical marijuana referral line. You can call us to ask questions about the corporate takeover or about industrial hemp or marijuana legalization at that number that's there on your screen. It's 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Again, if you need a referral for medical marijuana, or you want to find out more information about this corporate takeover, or the anything to do with marijuana legalization, please give us a call at 503-235-4606. I always have to throw that in there.
Yeah, I was tempted to turn around as I was walking up here, because I thought it was a mistake.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, it is a mistake, and hopefully we'll make these guys pay for making us do this, you know, and like I won't go on about it anymore.
Yeah, it's quite the ordeal.
So, but Colombia, not only is it been growing marijuana in large quantities, but recently the United Nations designated that Colombia has 40% of the medical export market, which has opened the door to enormous investments in Colombia for the medical marijuana market, because now they can export their cannabis to places where it can legally be imported, like Canada.
Right,
And
that's one of the big markets, it seems like.
yeah, and a number of other places. So how is that affecting the area around Toribio and who the kind of people that come through there?
There's some discussions going on. They're a little bit hesitant because they've been promised a lot of money in the past and it's never come to fruition.
Hey, well, I know what that's like. Hey, in
Exactly.
60 days, you'll have investment capital and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, we have another video we're going to roll right now, and this is Mark Emery from 1998, I believe it was, 1998, where we went down, and Paul Loney and I and Lanny Swerdlow and his partner Victor and I went and visited Hemp BC and Mark Emery. We'll be back right after this clip.
Here we are in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, interviewing the most famous marijuana smoker in the world. The latest, this is Mark Emery. Thanks for having us, Mark.
How are you, Paul? I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for having us. You originally were in Ontario.
Oh yeah, I
you,
was.
Were an activist there.
Oh yeah, since 1980 I've been an activist. You know, I was greatly inspired by Ayn Rand and the book Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead in 1979, and have become a real activist ever since in issues of human freedom and liberty. And nothing more pressing than marijuana legalization in that front. But for the first 12 years, from 1980 to 1992, I went to court and jail for many different things, opening my stores on Sunday, which we were convicted of and sent to jail. We used to sell everything that the government banned, so we went to court and were convicted there. And during a municipal garbage strike in 1986, I provided my own private garbage service for free for the public, picked up 72,000 pounds of garbage, just to basically show people they shouldn't be helpless during, government strikes. I mean, I've done all sorts of stuff, but prior to the marijuana legalization issue, which I really started in earnest in around 1991.
In 91, was that when you moved here? Was that back in
No, actually, I was in
as well?
Ontario. We started selling illegal banned books on marijuana. I was shocked to find that they were illegal, but I always wondered why High Times was never on the newsstands in Canada and why you couldn't buy any kind of material about marijuana. And it's because Canada has a law that basically says anything that promotes, advocates, or in any way condones marijuana use is illegal and subject to a $100,000 fine. And that's on video or in printed form.
It specifically asks for marijuana?
No, it says any illegal drug.
Oh,
so
any
you can't promote any illegal drug, and if marijuana is illegal, of course, and that's the primary one. I mean, there's not a lot of people promoting LSD or heroin, although there certainly is a lot of medical documentation that would also be illegal in those areas too. And of course, all books about the subject are illegal, et cetera, et cetera. And there are no exemptions, and it provides for a $100,000 fine and or 6 months in jail. And that's on a first offense. A second offense, $300,000. So anyway, there isn't any fine bigger than the criminal code, as it turns out. And that's all for books about marijuana. So anyway, we started selling them, but I didn't get charged for that one. That was clearly unconstitutional, so we ended up selling them in front of the police station one day after a big press conference and hundreds of people there, and they still wouldn't arrest me. So that was my history in Ontario, and then I went to Asia to live for a couple of years, came back here in March of '94, and founded Hemp BC on April 11th, 1994. And then we really kicked up some dust.
So what is, or at that time, what was Hemp BC? Because a lot of us don't know
Well, actually,
what Hemp BC was at that time.
when I came here, there were no hemp stores. There were no pipes or bongs. All that's illegal. There were no books about marijuana. The High Times magazine was illegal in all of Canada and not distributed here for 4 or 5 years by that time. And there was nothing. And so I knew there must be a market there somewhere. And what I did is from April 11th to July of that year, I sold High Times magazine and Growing Stone door to door to houses, to people at bus stops, to variety stores. I sort of was a mini distributor to about 40, 50 stores who were willing to handle it. But by the way, 4/5 of all the people approached in stores refused to handle High Times because it was banned, they said. And so, human freedom and liberty is not alive in the minds of most booksellers. But we did find some who'd sell it, like here and there, 5, 10, 20 copies and stuff like that. And that's what I did for 3 months. Sold things door to door and then earned enough money to pay the rent on the location at 324 West Hastings, which became the original Hemp BC and where we were first rated, and is now
Mark,
the
can
Hemp.
I stop you here just for a second? Where did you get the Hemp Times or the High Times from?
Oh, we would just import them. They didn't stop them at customs.
They didn't stop at customs.
No, that law was not being enforced, but the fear factor involved in having a law like that, meaning you could be charged at any time, meant that conventional distributors simply wouldn't handle it.
Okay.
Because the climate was also different in the 1980s in the Reagan-Bush period. People were easily scared off, but that started to thaw considerably, especially with the influence of The Emperor Wears No Clothes in the late 80s and early 90s. And eventually, we did open on July 7th, 1994, the Hemp BC store, which is now the Hemp BC Legal Assistance Center at that location.
I understand that block was all boarded up when you came to it, and that.
Oh, it's a bad
location was
block.
like
It was a slum.
firebombed.
Yeah, the exact location of where Hemp BC was founded used to be a communist Albanian bookshop, and it had been put out of business when somebody torched it. So the place was all fired and charred inside, and there was urine smells and urinal. It was a filthy block, and that was one of the filthiest buildings. But it was run by a guy who was anxious to have anybody renovate the place and fix it up, and that's how we got in a seemingly controversial business. We had an Asian landlord, and all my landlords are Asian for this building, all our stores, because they tend to only care if they get the rent. They don't really care about what you're doing in that building, and we really do renovate all the buildings extensively. All the properties we've ever been in have been improved considerably. So they benefited by that trust in us, and from there, though, we launched a separate grow shop down the street. Right after the first raid in January '96, we opened the little grow shop 3 weeks later, just next door, and then we consolidated those into the Hemp BC Superstore that you see now.
So what was the initial reaction of the authorities when you opened up the first Hemp BC store?
We never got any reaction. I've never yet had a complaint sent to me in letter form or in written form from the City Hall, from anybody. In fact, I've never had a complaint from the general public either. And I used to work there 6 days a week, and I've never had a single person say, I don't agree with what you're doing. I've never had it. It's the least controversial enterprise I've ever started.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, well, you got to understand that Vancouver and British Columbia are very much a live and let live society. The problem is they don't get politicians that reflect that. And that's typical because live and let live people don't tend to go vote. People who tend to vote tend to be people with property vested interests. People from Vancouver's west side who have a lot of wealthy property and they don't want anything to change, and they don't want to keep it white, Caucasian, and that old Vancouver. The people who want the new Vancouver are the immigrants, the new people here, the movers and shakers, young people who don't conventionally see any purpose to voting. And to a large degree, they're correct. There is no real purpose to voting, but the problem is we're victimized by the electoral process in the absence of that. So that's a problem.
Well, what do you see the future here in Vancouver, the city, and the province of BC about democracy then? If this many people are flouting the law, and they won't change the laws, is that going to have any sort of impact on democracy here, do you think?
Well, ultimately, politicians are like a flock of seagulls. They follow the leader, and the leader is public opinion. And public opinion, if it lingers long enough in the one direction, will eventually permeate society completely, and all people will presume that is the proper way to think. And so things are going to happen in a very gradualist way without any momentous decisions on behalf of Parliament or some old judge who is not going to deliver liberty to us because we think we're due. Judges are very frightened old men, really, who've been insulated behind a court bench for a lot of their lives and don't really understand the real world and aren't used to shaking things up in any proper, controversial way. Especially Canadian judges. Canadian judges are particularly conservative. They like to think they've got a heart of gold, and sometimes they do have a compassionate heart, but they're not the kind of people that are courageous enough to change laws. And you're not going to find politicians. You have 3 million pot smokers in the country, about 15% of the adult population, perhaps even more. You have clearly no one in favor of prohibition in Canada any longer, but nonetheless, you don't have a single advocate for marijuana legalization.
So that is a little bit of our interview with Mark Emery back in 1998 at Hemp BC in Vancouver, Canada. I had Paul Loney there with me. I was 20 years younger then, and look at it.
You look fine.
So we're about out of time. Mr. John Cornett is standing by to take us out with another song. You want to give a plug for your website, Clay?
Sure. If you have any extra cash and want to help me out in my plight, because this all cost me an enormous amount of money that I have to pay back to a friend of mine, please go to freeclay.org and give what you can. Or if you know somebody with money, tell them about it. You can read about it. You can message me. I'll tell you all about it. But yeah, I need help if I can get it, and also need help with writing my book. If there's any ghostwriters out there, contact me on Facebook.
Ghostwriters in
Yeah.
the sky.
I never even thought of that. That's what it is.
But it's not writers, it's writers.
It's true.
Sounds very similar.
Good. Yeah.
And again, if you need help finding a doctor who can help you with medical marijuana, or you want more information about our corporate takeover, about marijuana legalization, if you have any of these conditions, you need to find a doctor anywhere in the United States, you can call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Thanks for coming on, Clay.
You bet, man. It's been a
Welcome
pleasure.
back to America. We'll be at Expo MediWeed. Next week, I will be at Expo Weed in Mexico City. It's the third one. I'll be down there for the third event in Mexico. The website is expoweedmexico.com. expoweedmexico.com. And so we'll have a tape show next week, and we'll be back live on the 10th. So thanks for watching. Mr. John Cornette's about to play. Tune in next time and help us restore hemp.
Some folks like tomatoes, some like rhubarb pie. I like when my vegetables get me a little high. May not be for everyone, may not fit your needs. This incredible edible vegetable, more than just a weed. Credible, ooh, edible, ooh, vegetable. Credible, ooh, edible, ooh, vegetable. We use our weed for medicine, but sometimes we get high. The vegetable can heal disease, it's a truth we can't deny. May not be for everyone.